Hello friends, Good Morning to the Night is an album by Elton John and Pnau. It came out in 2012. Pnau are an Australian dance duo who've been mentored by Elton John for some time. Now this album was remarkably successful, going to #1 in the UK album charts. What happened? Well, Elton says that he let them run wild with his recordings. So they've taken a lot of his recordings, mainly from the early 1970s, and have remixed them into 8 individual pieces of music. How was it received? Well, The Guardian called it refreshingly unpredictable. NME said it had a ghostly melancholy about it. Now, we're presented on this album with 28 minutes of music, so you don't get an awful lot for your money on here. And we also have this cover here, a retro picture of Elton and then the Pnau duo on there. It has a kind of dated feel about the whole booklet here, as if that was sort of maybe part of the aim, because they're tying into the early 70s of music, that the artwork would also sort of mirror that time. And the back cover there looks a little bit like a concept album, doesn't it, from the 1970s as well, which of course was a great time for music. Now, important thing to say to start with is that as a lifelong Elton John fan, this album is not aimed at me. It's aimed really at, I suppose, the dance scene. It's aimed at a much, much younger audience than me. And so what we have here is an attempt really to take Elton's classic tunes and bring them to a new audience. So I suppose we should judge it partly on that basis. And because of its reception and its popularity, we've got to say it has done that job. It has taken Elton's music to a new audience, a bit like Elton's duet with Dua Lipa, Cold Heart, and his recent collaboration with Britney Spears. But I'm going to be reviewing it, of course, on the basis of being an Elton John fan. What do I think about his music being used in this way? One of the quite enjoyable things listening to this album is playing Spot the Song. Now, thankfully, on the booklet, it does list all the different songs that have been used on each track. I've got to say, it's pretty difficult to spot quite a few of those. Usually each track, there's a dominant particular song that's been used that comes back several times, and maybe another one that it sort of blends into now and then. But the other influences are very subtle indeed. Now, as you know, normally with my album gradings, I give each track a mark out of 10. I did start doing this, but I felt in the end that that probably wasn't the best way to proceed, because this isn't an Elton John original album. There's no original music from Elton John on this. There have been some bits added in by Pnau and some other musicians. So it wouldn't be really fair for me to compare this with other Elton John albums. But I will at the end give it an overall rating and tell you how I think it fits in with the other albums that I reviewed. Now, the opening track is Good Morning to the Night. So this is the title track. It's got a thudding dance beat, as you'd probably expect. It's drawing mainly on Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters from the Honky Chateau album. There's other things mixed in there. Some keyboards from Funeral for a Friend, which is used on several of the tracks on this one. It's very repetitive, but again, we expect that in this sort of music. Interestingly, there is a reference in the notes to Hey Jude, which of course is part of a trilogy from the Empty Sky album. Now, I couldn't spot that, but if you can, let me know where you think it is. And also something from the 60 Years On recording from Live in Australia. Now, just bear with me a second. That features, of course, on this album, which I do have in the vinyl and will be reviewing at some stage as well. But that is the recording that's been used. And that, again, that reappears later on the CD as well. Now, what do we think about a classic track like Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, which is one of Elton's greatest ballads, an absolutely wonderful lyric, a wonderful melody. What do we feel about it being cut up like this and spliced in here and there? I suspect that quite a few long-term fans might not be too happy about that. I didn't get an awful lot from this song. Again, if it goes on to become a popular hit with new people, then fair enough. If they hear that song and think, well, I want to go and listen now to Honky Chateau, then fair enough, and they rediscover the originals, then it's done its job. In terms of wanting to listen to this again, I'm not sure I actually would. Now, the second track is called Sad. I'm slightly endeared to this because it begins with one of my favourite sort of offbeat Elton John songs, which is Crazy Water from Blue Moves. I always enjoy that song, so I'm glad that they've sampled a bit of that one. But then we go into vocals from Curtains, which is, of course, from Captain Fantastic. And it's the line about the used to know an old scarecrow, and that sort of links back right to one of Elton's first recordings, one of the first songs that he wrote with Bernie. So that's quite a nice link. But of course, because the lines are out of context, the words don't make any sense at all. There's no progression through the idea of the song. So you've got a bit here, bit there. There's even a bit apparently from Nice and Slow, which is from the Tom Bell sessions. Again, I couldn't really spot that in there. And there's a little bit of the Friends soundtrack and a little bit of Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. It's quite a pleasant soundscape, this one. You know, dancers in a club would probably quite enjoy doing whatever they do at that age to this sort of music. The third track is Black Icy Stare. This samples a bit of what I consider possibly one of Elton's worst songs, which is Solar Prestige. This is from the Caribou album. It's a nonsense song that he kind of made up almost to sort of, I don't know, have a go at the critics to say, well, I can write a song with just nonsense words. Why this is in there, I'm not really sure. Anyway, the whole thing is that comes across like a little bit of a bad dream, you know, a little bit of a bad experience. It's a little bit on the dull side for me, although there is some nice organ going on towards the end. Track 4 is Foreign Fields. Now, I've written down on my notes here, how dare they, because this samples the sublime High Flying Bird from the Don't Shoot Me album, along with Blues for My Baby and Me, which is not on here, but you know, two absolutely fantastic tracks there. I don't really want these playing with, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with how they are. You know, I'm not sure about that really. And the refrain of High Flying Bird has been given different chords, different harmony. Why mess with something that's so good? Anyway, just a comment. We've got a bit of Cage the Songbird there. Again, another song I really like from Blue Moves. I don't think I'll be going back to this one. Now, Telegraph to the Afterlife is the fifth track here. It has a kind of Tom Waits style opening, actually, and then a little bit more of Funeral for a Friend. And then a bit of another one of my favourite Elton songs, Harmony from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. For me, that's an almost perfect album track, that. I think I either graded it a 9 or a 10, possibly a 10. It's just a great recording. Again, I'm not sure I want this taking apart, to be honest. Anyway, it does keep its melody and it keeps its harmony on this one. There's a little bit in this track that reminds me a bit of that Foreigner song, I've Been Waiting for a Girl Like You. And there's also a bit of Love Song. Again, that beautiful Leslie Duncan song that Elton sings on the Tumbleweed Connection album, of course. And there's some seagulls there from Sweet Painted Lady. So there's lots of great songs being used here. But again, I would just say I'd prefer to hear them in their original state. Now, the song Grey Seal from Goodbye Brick Road appears in the next one, Phoenix. So a fairly conventional start to this track. The refrain's a little bit hard to pick up the influences on, I've found. A little bit of Someone Saved My Life Tonight. I think the other references are buried quite a long way in the mix, but again, sound detectives would probably pick up those as well. Not a highlight on the album for this one. Track number 7 is called Karmatron, and it starts up a little bit like the theme tune from the Thunderbirds, actually. Now we've got Madman Across the Water here being used. Again, just a classic song for me off a brilliant album. And then we go into a bit of the orchestration from One Horse Town, which of course is from Blue Moves. Again, a song I like very much. And then Funeral for a Friend comes back in. It's quite a thrilling track, this one, actually. But again, I'm left wanting more of these individual songs. I quite like the idea of some of them being represented with new arrangements, but I think I probably would have preferred just one track at a time. If you're going to redo Madman in a new way, and that's fine with me. I'm not sure about splicing these together, but that's just me being old-fashioned. What I do think about this Karmatron is that it captures the madness of that track quite well. That sort of anarchic sort of soundscape they've created there. I do enjoy that. Now the last track actually is the best one, I think, on the album. It's called 60. And what they've done here is they've combined parts of 3 recordings of 60 Years On. We've got one from the Elton John album, the original. We've got one bit from 17/11/70, and we've got another bit from the Elton John in Australia concert with the symphony orchestra there from Melbourne. And they've combined all these together, and we've got a kind of choral start to it. And again, fans out there, can you listen to this and tell me, is this from the original Elton John album? Is it the backing vocals that have been brought up here? I'd like to know what's going on there. So they create quite a nice soundscape here. It's quite atmospheric. There's no other vocals at all in there. They haven't sampled the vocals at all in this. They've stuck with the instrumental. And I think in a way, this works better. It's almost like comparing, which of these recordings kind of work the best and taking the best of each one, putting them together. I think this is probably the best bit of the album here. Now, I did score the tracks just for my own benefit, and I came out with an average of 3.13 marks per track, which puts it sort of below average for me. Now, in the list of all the Elton albums that I've reviewed, this would put it in 35th place, just one ahead of Victim of Love, which scores 3. Again, these are just my own enjoyment marks on these. So I've got to say, as an Elton John purist, it's not a project that I'm probably going to go back to very much. However, having said that, it was obviously popular. It's obviously introduced Elton's music to a new audience. So if it makes more people interested in the music we love from Elton, then all to the fore, really, and well done for doing it. I enjoy listening to cover versions of Elton John songs. Probably just would have preferred some reworkings of entire songs. And of course, we know that from the early 70s, there are some brilliant songs there. Anyway, that's just my view. What do you think of this album? Have you got it? Have you got a favourite track? What do you think of this idea of kind of reworking, re-editing Elton's music? And would it work for the 1980s, for instance, or the 1990s, his music there? Let me know down below. I'll be back with more reviews soon. Don't forget, we're still standing.